Hermvids with Mr. Herman. Educational videos about reading and writing. You have to vary your sentences. Creative Writing 2 Storyteller Unit. This is Skill 10 Sentence Variety. I apologize for the gifs on this one because I'm kind of running out of ideas, but this one's funny. There you go. Sentence variety means a few things, and there's a few different ways to get there. Varying sentence length can be a good habit to get into. You can still prefer using long or mostly short sentences, but it's good to mix up every so often. Just like this guy is mixed up. It's a loose connection at best, I apologize. You can mix up the sentence length. It gives a good rhythm for your readers. You can think of it like a necklace. There are gems every so often, and here's an example of a gem. It's a run-on, and run-ons are okay, but they should have a point, and there shouldn't be too many of them. What I mean by they should have a point is a run-on should match the emotion that's associated with that part, or maybe it's for a specific purpose in terms of detail description or imagery description. Or it could be purposefully confusing to the reader. This is from a guy named John Updike, who's a great writer. He wrote a book called Rabbit Run, and this is one whole sentence. Check how many lines that is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. But the sentence itself is one that is full of emotion, and it's almost this like flood of memories from the past. So it's a perfect example of a well-used run-on sentence. Sentence fragments are okay too. Those are just incomplete sentences. You may have heard that in your English classes before. You have to make sure that they're there for a purpose, though. So the example that we're going to use for this one is a guy named Cormac McCarthy, who wrote a book called The Road, which is a post-apocalyptic novel. And he uses these fragments frequently. They give the purpose of a stilted quality, meaning a kind of abrupt ending. It's kind of suitable for this kind of dark dystopian future, and these people are almost like in survival mode, and they don't have enough energy to think in complete sentences almost, if that makes sense. Here's the excerpt. In the morning they went on. Desolate country. A boar hide nailed to the barn door. Ratty. Wisp of a tail. Inside the barn, 3 bodies hanging from the rafters, dried and dusty among the wan slats of light. So you can see that those fragments there give this a kind of weird rhythm, and it's almost like someone describing a crime scene. They're not being overly flowery with their description of this really dark circumstance. Another great way to have some sentence variety is vary the way you start sentences. Sometimes you may not even realize it, but you may fall into these patterns where you're starting sentences the same way. For instance, you might start with the word the, or I, or this, and it can get really monotonous and boring for the reader. So I took this from a great writing website called Purdue Owl, and their recommendation is you can use verbs and prepositions to start a sentence. Those are fine. But what they like is mixing things up and mixing up the order of the sentences. So they take this very basic sentence here. The biggest coincidence that day happened when David and I ended up sitting next to each other at the Super Bowl. And they come up with different ways to rewrite it, revisions. Coincidentally, David and I ended up sitting right next to each other at the Super Bowl. You can shorten things. In an amazing coincidence, David and I ended up sitting next to each other at the Super Bowl. Next one starts with a verb. Sitting next to David at the Super Bowl is a tremendous coincidence. And the next one, a conjunction. But the biggest coincidence that day happened when David and I ended up sitting next to each other at the Super Bowl. Depends what you want to use these sentences for, but each different beginning can give a different feel to your narrative and your fiction story. Let's figure out how we're going to practice this. In the Google Docs folder under Storytellers and Skill 10, you have your sentence variety practice, in which you're going to describe a character, emotion, setting, or idea in 2 different ways. The first should be a bunch of fragments, and the second should be a run-on. And then I want you to decide which one you prefer and why. Are you someone who uses more stilted dialogue, like Cormac McCarthy, or stilted description, I should say? Or are you more like that John Updike example with a long emotional run-on sentence? It's up to you to decide.